They're not going to come online instantaneously. They're going to have to go through intensive training. They're going to have to go through a lot of gunnery maneuver. They're going to have to learn how to maintain them, learn how to create logistics lines to make sure that they're fueled and upgunned all the time. And at Ukraine's choosing, it's quite possible that they could not only do one major offensive with these forces by June or July, they could do several offensives with these forces once they are consolidated into the task groups that they're going to use. The Russians are not going to be able to do anything about this.
Well, joining me now to digest this, someone who spent last or part of last year fighting Russian forces in Ukraine, Malcolm Nance, the former counterterrorism and intelligence officer. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Hi, Malcolm. First of all, based on your experience of being over there, is Ukraine ready to mobilise these tanks as soon as they're received? We've heard that the first batch of Leopard 2s from Germany should reach Ukraine by the end of March.
Well, yeah, I think that the Ukrainians have the capacity to really turn this into a potent force. Let me just clarify some things. I came to Ukraine in March. I used to be in news media. I was the terrorism and intelligence analyst for a very large, the second largest U.S. news organization on television, and I spent 10 months fighting with the International Legion in Ukraine. What I saw very early on is when the Polish donated 270 T-72s, the Ukrainians took them on board, trained crews, and consolidated them into a major offensive force that took back the entirety of Kharkiv province in 72 hours. That was in September in the Kharkiv offensive. This is what Ukraine is going to do with these new Western forces. They're not going to come online instantaneously. They're going to have to go through intensive training. They're going to have to go through a lot of gunnery maneuver. They're going to have to learn how to maintain them, learn how to create logistics lines to make sure that they're fueled and upgunned all the time. And at Ukraine's choosing, it's quite possible that they could not only do one major offensive with these forces by June or July, they could do several offensives with these forces once they are consolidated into the task groups that they're going to use. The Russians are not going to be able to do anything about this. Even their best tank right now, the T-90, just would not have the capacity to stop these very modern Western tanks of just, to be quite honest, slaughtering them.
Russia, as I've just hinted there, are interpreting this latest move, the supply of Western tanks, as aggressive. President Putin's spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, has said that it's seen as direct involvement in the conflict, and he's noted that that is growing. What then does that mean, might that mean, for President Putin's next move?
Well, now we're taking a geopolitical look at the supplying of major resources to an ally of the Europeans who are on the front edge of defending the Western world from the collapse of democracy from a dictator. My question is this, but when you hear claims about Russia saying this is an escalation, this is going to cause us to respond. What are they going to do about it? They have virtually an army that has been destroyed. Make no mistake, I have been there, I have seen it myself. The Russians are losing this war horribly in every front, with exception of the Donbass and the Kherson front, of which they lost the major city Kherson. The Russians are collapsing. Their combat power is weakening. All they are doing now is mobilizing men and throwing them to the slaughter. There is, what escalation could Russia see this as? I mean, if we send them more artillery ammunition or more multiple rocket launch systems, Russia will say the same thing each time. They are relying on the West to be, to have the pacifists within our groups, and I'm a pacifist. I don't like war. To come out and say, well, Russia could do something escalatory, like use chemical weapons. Well, they could, but that's a war crime. Or they could threaten what they're doing every night on Russian state TV, threaten to blow up, Scotland. They actually said that they would use a nuclear torpedo to blow up London. This is rhetoric. Vladimir
Empty
Putin
threats.
understands, yes, yeah, they're very empty threats. No one is going to atomic war in this world to destroy the world over Russia's military loss in eastern Ukraine. No one. No. Vladimir Putin could lose his mind, but it's not rational. And they have children too, as the old song goes.
I guess the sort of natural question I'm prompted to then is sort of asking whether he will bow out of this war. I mean, it's not what's just being announced and has been announced within the last 24 hours or so. You've also got other nations, Norway preparing to send over tanks, Canada, Finland, Spain, all will take part in the tank coalition. Portugal's expected to announce its participation in the next few days. Sweden and Denmark have said that they are open to signing up. So what we have here is a true coalition of countries sending tanks with more to be announced. And we're dealing with a huge ego here in Vladimir Putin. He's got to work out, can he work out, is there a way for him to exit this war and still retain his position as president of Russia? How does he exit this war? I can't say gracefully because nothing's been graceful at all about the war. But then how does he exit the war? Does he exit the war?
You know, psychologists are worried about what they call narcissistic collapse. That's when the reality of what's actually happening in the world intrudes on the narcissistic personality that has led themselves into a corner. When Adolf Hitler had narcissistic collapse, he shot himself. Now, we're not saying that that's a solution here. What we're saying is that Vladimir Putin has the option to lash out in ways that will impact everyone in this world. When I was out in Kharkiv in August, and like I said, I was there from March until November. We were prepared for a chemical weapons attack. Everyone has, modern Western gas masks, rubber overcovers, because we thought that Vladimir Putin, once he lost all of his major forces in the Northeast, and we started pushing the Russian border, could use chemical weapons against us. That's still on the table, but it's limited. It could kill as many of his forces as ours. He did it in his Syria. He helped the Syrians do it, but that doesn't mean that is his only option. He could, in fact, use a tactical nuclear weapon, but at that point, he's at war with the world. And most likely, and I wrote a recent Substack article about this. The pressures to get rid of Vladimir Putin will only come from someone inside Vladimir Putin's own hierarchy, whether it's one of his oligarchs, a bodyguard who lost a relative. These things could pressure them to change Putin's command permanently. But the West is only going to supply Ukraine with more weapons. Ukraine is winning this war. They are taking casualties, but Russia is losing.